Welcome to today's session on ADHD and executive functioning. Now, it's important to remember some children might present with all symptoms of ADHD, while other children might not present with all the symptoms, but still might have difficulties in organizing themselves, keeping their belongings in order. They might be impulsive, or they might need some extra support. So in today's session, we're going to unpack what ADHD is, and we'll really focus on those practical supports. So whether your child might have a few symptoms or might be diagnosed with ADHD, I trust the session is going to be very helpful in developing practical tools and strategies that we can use as parents to help our children be more organized, be able to communicate their feelings and needs better, and also be able to self-monitor and understand and develop better systems for functioning at home as well as school. For the first few minutes, we're going to look at a background of just understanding ADHD. ADHD is a condition of the brain that makes it difficult for children to control their behavior. It's one of the most chronic conditions at childhood. It affects about 4 to 12% of school-aged kids, and we can see 3 times more prevalent in boys than girls. It can affect kids in different ways. There's 3 main areas of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattentive symptoms. So breaking down the 2 main areas here of hyperactive impulsive children and inattentive. The hyperactive impulsive child is the one who talks excessively, acts without thinking, and they really stand out in a classroom setting or a home setting, is just always on the go. Where the inattentive child blends in a little bit more. They might have difficulties sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. They might be quite disorganized and have difficulty managing their belongings, keeping them in order, and following through on tasks, but they might not be as apparent or as standing out or exclamation point as the hyperactive impulsive child. Children who are hyperactive and impulsive typically have more difficulties with social relationships at school, as well as staying focused in an academic classroom setting at school. The inattentive child might have difficulties staying focused or with their academics, but they stand out a little bit less than the child who would be more inattentive. We can see in terms of diagnosis that symptoms occur in more than one setting, at home, school, and different situations. The symptoms have to start before age 7 or recognized before age 7 and continue for at least 6 months. And it might be difficult for your child to function at home, school, or in different social situations. In addition to looking at your child's behavior, it's good to check in with your pediatrician. So if you feel like your child's having concerns with sustaining attention or meeting some of those symptoms, the great first step is to talk to your pediatrician and chat with them about some of your concerns, and they can provide some formal assessment tools to explore ADHD in more detail. That's a little bit of background with ADHD. Now we're going to look specifically at teenagers. Dealing with ADHD in teenagers can be challenging for sure. There's many children that I've tested and worked with and supported in various capacities who have ADHD, and we see some of them, especially grades probably 2 to 6, those symptoms being most severe and challenging in terms of staying focused in the classroom and self-regulating and managing their behavior. As children become more self-aware and able to self-regulate and self-monitor, we see them able to better control their symptoms. Some children grow in that self-awareness faster than others. Those that progress and are able to self-regulate and self-monitor, we see their symptoms managed a little bit better, but those who are less self-aware really do struggle still throughout the teenage years. According to the American Academic of Pediatrics, that academy, they said 80% who required medication as a child for ADHD still need it as a teenager. And that's a question I'm always asked or often asked: does my child need medication? What are some of the best ways to treat and support ADHD? I believe the literature and practical experience and approaches would suggest often medical supports with cognitive behavioral strategies, specifically in teaching of executive skills and executive functioning, are often the most effective approach. There are some children who have more mild cases of ADHD who might not require medication as much, but still really benefit from those executive skills and functionings and the tools and strategies we're going to be talking about today. Regardless, here are some very just effective general strategies before we get into the specifics that can help any child, especially those who are teenagers. So using a daily planner, that can be a really important piece. Making lists or having a checklist on your phone, keeping a routine, staying in a routine as much as possible is so important for those who have ADHD, and being able to have a non-distracted place to do homework and other activities, as well as finding practical ways to stay organized. One of the most important pieces is getting enough sleep. I know there's teenagers I've worked with and children who have ADHD who aren't able to sleep, and working with the doctor and other specialists to find ways to improve the child's sleep. For a couple of the children I've worked with has really improved their symptoms of ADHD as well. Staying active is another really important key in different activities, as well as making sure you're mindful of your diet and minimizing high sugar, high energizing foods. Crunchy, healthy snacks like vegetables and fruits can be really helpful as well. And having those regulation breaks, where I find some children and teenagers who do have ADHD benefit from more frequently snacking as well. So before we get into skills and strategies, one thing I always like to point out is the positives around having ADHD. There's a list here, a beautiful list from Springfield Clinic, about 25 positives of having ADHD. So I'll highlight just a couple. One is typically children tend to have a lot more energy. They get along well with adults. They sometimes have a good sense of humor. They can be spontaneous, fun, enjoyable, connecting. And I think it's really interesting because ADHD can definitely be a challenge as a child. But I often remind parents, if we can learn how to steward it, develop executive functioning skills to organize, manage, and plan our life, and become less impulsive, some of the difficulties of ADHD, that piece can actually become strengths. As an adult, people who tend to own their own businesses or be successful in different areas of life tend to be quite gregarious, outgoing, fun, exciting, and you can see a lot of these qualities in people we would define as successful in our world. So it's neat as we develop some of those skills and strategies, the strengths or positives about ADHD can come out more, and we can really help our children capitalize on those as well. And there's 5 main areas I want to point out here. The first one's empathize. Children with ADHD, they can be self-conscious and they can feel bad of not being able to perform in the same way as your neurotypical child. So really empathizing where they're at and making sure you're supporting them is so important to know that you're in their corner. And even for myself, because I have ADHD, I find that as a great tool or way to empathize with those teenagers and children that I work with and say, hey, yeah, ADHD is hard. If I don't have my keys organized, I lose them too, or whatever it might be for those who experience it as well as adults, of just journeying and normalizing that and then developing some strategies. And that's where getting neutral is important. Instead of reacting or becoming frustrated when your child loses something again, getting neutral, reminding yourself, okay, how can I stay neutral and just neutrally think about this particular situation and respond in a compassionate way. Narrow is another key as well. So, if a child has a lot of things in their mind, being able to focus in on stay on one topic at a time, optimizing, making sure your child's ready to listen, and being able to kind of cue them for ways that we can work towards a solution. So kind of moving forward and get moving. So helping your child become more independent and solve his or her own problems. And that's where we really want to focus on those executive functions, those skills and strategies that we can model and coach to help our children understand and develop those tools and strategies to be more effective. So executive functioning and executive functions is a set of mental processes that helps us connect past experience with present action, according to the Executive Function 101 prepared by the National Center for Learning Disabilities. So people with developing those executive functions use them to perform such tasks as planning, organizing, strategizing, paying attention, and remembering details and managing time and space. These are skills and processes each of us use in everyday life to make plans, keep track of time and finish our work, keep track of more than one thing at a time, meaningfully include knowledge about the past, evaluate our ideas, engage in group dynamics, wait until we're called on, and kind of make mid-course corrections. So as you can tell, executive functioning is so key to our everyday life, whether it be at school, at the workplace, in social situations. We need our executive skills to be able to act and interact with the world around us effectively. So I always say, ADHD, or the symptoms of ADHD, are kind of understanding the problem or what our challenges are, and building executive skills or executive functioning is kind of like the solution. So if we can build our executive skills and executive functioning, which of course most children with ADHD would have a deficit in, building those skills can build us up so the symptoms of ADHD are less likely to affect us or impact us. So that's where it's all about monitoring and coaching. Our job as parents is to model and coach these skills and strategies that don't come explicitly or intuitively for children with ADHD. And we can do that by keeping our kids on schedule, giving reminders, and helping our children regulate as well. So knowing that even for all teenagers, our brain is not fully grown yet, the logic part in our frontal lobes is still developing, while the emotional amygdala part sometimes tends to be a bit more in charge. So really helping our children develop those skills and strategies and those external tools that can help us engage in more logical and practical strategies. And that's where executive functions come in. We'll look at a few of the different executive functions here. So understanding how I'm feeling is the first step, building emotional awareness. That really helps for both emotional control and impulse control, and then being able to take goal-directed actions or steps through planning and prioritization, the ability to create steps to reach a goal and make a decision about what I want to focus on. So those are 3 areas of executive functioning that can really help us. We can see very practically one area for planning and prioritization is making a checklist. So, for example, when you're making a checklist and prioritizing tasks, looking at what's most important first. For all of us, we think, yeah, I kind of want to maybe relax now or have some ice cream or have some cake or relax, but first I've got to do my work and then I can relax. We're working from simple to complex tasks. Let's say if you're doing schoolwork, okay, what's the simplest task first? What's the easiest subject to do? We'll start there, complete those questions, and move to something more complex or independent to needing help. So finish what I can first on my own, and then when I finish everything that I can do on my own, I'll ask questions or ask for help. In planning and prioritization, one thing that really helps for impulse control, as well as planning, is a P1, P2, P3 system, which I have a lot of families with children with ADHD use at home. So P1 means you have to do something now. So if mom says, unload the dishwasher, it's a P1, it needs to be done right now. No negotiating, no 1 more minute, I'll do that later, all those different comments. A P1 is now. A P2 is 20 minutes. So there might be some tasks that a parent asks you to do that is not a P1. It doesn't have to be done this minute. So what we can do is set a timer for, let's say, 10 minutes. So when the timer goes off on your phone or alarm for both the parent and the child, it reminds them, okay, I've got to do this task. I've got 10 more minutes to do it. And then when it goes off the second time, you need to actually do it. And if the task is not done within 20 minutes, logical consequences can follow that have been agreed upon by the parent and child beforehand. So it motivates our kids. When we ask them to do something, they follow through. The final piece is a P3, things that we need to do by the end of the day. So writing them on a checklist on the fridge and crossing them off can be a great way of monitoring and making sure those tasks get done. So being able to plan and monitor for that is really important. So just having one practical strategy that you use every day at home can really support in that process. The next areas are flexibility, working memory, and self-monitoring. So flexibility looks at the ability to change strategies or revise plans. Working memory is holding information, and self-monitoring is the ability to monitor and evaluate your own performance. So those 3 areas are really important to look at as well, and they tie into task initiation and organization too. So those are, in summary, the big 8 in terms of executive skills or executive functions that we can build practically into our everyday lives. So understanding what they are is the first part. So as you have the PDF, I encourage you to read over them in a bit more detail. So knowing what we want to build, and then we'll talk about some practical strategies of how we can actually build those. One practical strategy is being aware of our time pirates or time thieves. Those are the things that distract us and prevent us from completing tasks, from starting our task, initiating them, from staying organized, and being able to self-monitor as well. So for many of us, it's phones or technology. Other times it could be friends or family members. Anything that kind of distracts us. So being aware of those time pirates is really important. And one of the most important things for children with ADHD is minimizing those things. So when I'm trying to do some work on my computer, I shut my phone off and put it in a different place. I close my room so I'm just there by myself so there's no other distractions. As well as I find that having some light background music without lyrics, instrumental piano, can just really help me focus on my task at hand. So whatever symptoms of ADHD your child is experiencing, minimizing distractions of time pirates or time thieves is so important so we can stay focused on that task at hand. In terms of planning for specific interventions to support your child, here's 3 very important goals to consider. 1 is setting specific goals. So start with 1 or 2 specific goals. Like we said, maybe it's just the priority 1 list. P1, P2, P3. Just start there with 1 or 2 goals. We're talking about a lot of different ideas today. So I want you to write down the 1 or 2 that are most important for you and your child to work on. The second piece is providing rewards and consequences. So motivators, a great thing is to set your 2 goals and then have a checklist on the fridge. If you accomplish your goal, like doing your priority 1 tasks that day or getting those chores done, you can put a check mark. If not, put an X or something of that nature. The best reward systems or reinforcements are building the positive. So hopefully we can set up a reward system where, let's say if you do all your P1s today, you can have a small reward. For some children, it might be working towards monetary value or extra tech time or whatever their currency is. And making those rewards based on every day can motivate us each and every single day to work towards those tasks and keeping with it. So daily monitor and review. At the end of each day, at dinner time or wherever it might be, ask your child, how did those 2 goals today? Let's put a check mark, an X, or maybe a question mark if it's kind of in the middle, and reward your child daily accordingly for being able to do whatever goals you set out to do. And that's really important. And I think that's the biggest thing for ADHD intervention. I've supported a lot of children and families in this area. The biggest thing is keeping it simple and doing it daily. If you can have 2 simple goals and review it every day and check mark and reinforce those goals every day, that's when we're going to see things working most effectively.
Thanks for watching this video. We hope you got something out of it. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button.